structural differential fuzzer. As a result, the fuzzing speed has dropped dramatically, but that's expected. But it's still going quite well. So we lost an order of magnitude in fuzzing speed, unfortunately. But yeah, we've started pocking our custom fuzzing engine. So hoping to have that up and running by next week. Apart from that, I've been debugging a few discrepancies, a few crashes. I have about 3 to 4 crashes that I'm currently investigating. So I'll be reaching out to the client teams that are affected most likely tomorrow. Yeah, that's about it.
Mehdi, what is it about techo that's slowing things down?
Oh, it's just the JVM really. So instantiating the JVM. So the way we're integrating techo is by using JNIs. So essentially we're calling Java functions from Rust, in which case you need to instantiate the JVM, and that's just, yeah, the fuzzing cycles are extremely slow, but that's expected. We've had the exact same issue when we first started playing with differential fuzzing a few months ago. It is what it is when you have, 4 different clients, Go routines, a Java virtual machine, along with so Nimbus and Lighthouse. It's expected. Nothing really surprising there. It's just a bit annoying.
To instantiate the JVM on each new fuzzing target, or is that?
Yeah. So for each fuzzing target, yeah, totally. Not for each fuzzing cycle. Okay. So once you've instantiated it, you're fine. But yeah, you do need to instantiate it for each run. And it's yeah, that the fuzzings now take about 10 to 12 gigs of RAM, so it's not ideal, but luckily we have that fuzzing infrastructure that we're leveraging for this. So no issues really. It's just, yeah, just super slow.
Cool. Any other questions for Mehdi? Anything else here before we move on to client updates? Actually, we'll move on to Zinken. Good work on Zinken. I know there were a little snafu on Prism release stuff that caught the block explorer, but I think generally users had a positive experience, and testnet came out finalizing pretty well out the gate. Any more discussion or thoughts people want to have around Zinken? Cool. I just looked at Zinken. Looks strong. Seems like 4% of validators based since the last 12 hours turned their nodes off. I think more important to talk about is Madasha, where Madasha stands. I've been kind of operating under the assumption that because Madasha is not v1.0, fully v1.0 conformant, and because we expect probably the vast majority of community users to turn their nodes off when mainnet comes, that it might be natural to sunset Madasha in favor of a longstanding 1.0 testnet that we can start either that is more largely controlled by us rather than the community for a longer term stability. I don't expect users in the community to run 2 nodes in the long term. They might pop in and out of testnets to test things. We could do that, call it 2-3 weeks before mainnet launch. We could also do that 2-3 weeks after mainnet launch. Regardless, I think in the time leading up to mainnet, we should stand up a number of 1.0 testnets for ourselves to test all the machinery. But I know that there's some desire to maybe upgrade Madasha to VLSV4 and DiskV5 to kind of test these components at load. So I want to hear y'all's thoughts rather than just give my own thoughts on what to do with Medasha.
Hey, Preston here. I just wanted to advocate for keeping Medasha around after mainnet. The reason being is that like even though we might see a big drop off after mainnet and validators will have to be exited and all this stuff, we'll still have a month or two of syncing data that we can keep around. So as we're testing new features and things for mainnet, we can try it out in Medasha and see, okay, we have all this data and have a lead time on mainnet. So if there is an issue, say after syncing 10,000 epochs, we would catch that earlier rather than seeing it in mainnet. So that, I think it would be worthwhile to have some already existing long-running testnet before we go to mainnet and keeping it around. But yeah, I do think I agree that it will be kind of like we're seeing now. It'll be difficult to keep it up if people aren't interested in it.
Yeah, I mean, as Medasha stands today, I'm actually fine with having a stressful 3 weeks of non-finality and seeing a leak. I think that we are probably slightly bored with Medasha too, in the sense that stably it seems to run fine, and now we get to put it in a stressful scenario again. Probably not as stressful as what we saw a couple months ago, but I think certainly there's two issues in keeping Medasha around. It's that VLSV4 upgrade, which is actually probably relatively easy. But there's the DiskV5 upgrade, which is potentially non-trivial. Do others have thoughts or opinions on keeping Medasha around, a preference one way or the other, and thoughts on an in-flight upgrade of 5.0 to 5.1 on DiskV5?
I personally would like to upgrade Medasha to basically BOSV4 and DiskV5, just because as a client, from client's point of view, it's kind of hard to maintain two branch and one for Medasha and then like one for the latest.
Yeah, well, once we have a mainnet, we will also probably not drop it, but rather upgrade it. So maybe it's a good chance to test even more involved upgrades on a running network.
The harder of the upgrades is the DiskV5 Proto. You spent a little bit of time playing with that yesterday. You want to chime in?
Yeah, so to smoothen the migration path from version 5.0 to 5.1, we can run this additional software that basically runs both versions at the same time with two identities, and then tries to bridge the data from one to the other. I've made a prototype of that. I'm still trying to polish that, test it, so that could help. But it's only a tool on this migration path. I don't think it's the core component.
The alternative being, at a certain point in time, all nodes do a script migration from 5.0 to 5.1 format and don't have to maintain two protocols simultaneously, and put a stronger assumption on a coordination point amongst all nodes. Is that viable as well? Okay, we've heard from Prism. I'd like to hear from if any other teams have some thoughts on this.
One problem in particular that we had, we already upgraded to the spec 1.0, but since the epoch for E-plan voting period was changed, and this is compile time settings for us, it's now a bit difficult to support Medasha because we have to go back to custom builds. which are their testnet. And we prefer to ship a single binary for all users.
I see.
And similarly, DiskV5 5.1 is a compile time settings for us. So supporting multiple networks is a complication.
I think it's similar for us. The less test nets we have to support, the better. I know Age was keen on upgrading, seeing how we could potentially upgrade Medasha to DiskV 5.1. So I'm not sure if perhaps we could attempt that upgrade and yeah, can the testnet after that.
Anything else here? We don't have consensus. We have, I think, compile time constants make it difficult because mainnet has slightly different constants. We have a desire to maybe try and upgrade in flight, and then can it, and then we have a desire to keep it running so that we have a longer a testnet with longer sync times come mainnet, so we have something a little bit more hardy to prototype against. Let's open up an issue. We can continue the conversation and try to figure something out maybe by Monday on what to do here. I don't want to. I know that this also balanced with the more particular things we try to do with Medasha, the more of other things that we're not going to get to before mainnet launch. So I know it's a time balancing thing as well. Okay. Anything else here before we move on? Again, I'll open up an issue. I'd like to try to continue the conversation and figure something out by early next week. Okay, let us do client updates. We can start with Lodestar.
Hey, so we participated in a small way on Zinkin. We tried to run four validators, and basically our status was that we had some incompatibility between our, I think between the URLs that the validator was requesting, and what the beacon node was serving. So our validator is offline right now, but I guess the good news is that our beacon node is stable and staying synced to the head, at least in a read-only fashion. So that's good news for us because this is kind of the first testnet that we have, not sunk on. So feeling good about that. Moving forward, we're gonna fix up the validator interaction. We've been doing some things with the validator behind the scenes, so it's a little bit. I think we should be able to participate. Now we're keeping track of reorgs and new blocks coming in on an epoch boundary to keep our duties valid, get the right duties, which was plaguing us in the past. So we're basically just trying to get to like a stable point where we have a stable validator, stable beacon node, and then we'll revisit like where we're going to go after that. So hopefully make a new cut a release of something stable in the next week or two, and then look at what's next.
Cool. Is one of the reasons you're able to follow because of the lower load? Have you all tested on Medasha recently?
I think the reason is because we have I think it's the signature policy for the new signature policy on PubSub, Gossip Sub, like that we don't have that merged into our master branch, but we were testing it out on Zinkin. So I think we just have like better gossip behavior. Like we're not getting kicked and we're not getting blacklisted and whatnot.
Cool. Thank you, Cayman. Let's do Nimbus.
Right, the primary focus for us has been our ongoing audit, which is now in its final stages. Most of the issues that have been posted are now addressed, and we are undergoing the review phase of the fixes. As next step, we plan to join the public attack nets. In other news, we've upgraded this to 1.0 version of the spec, as I mentioned, and we are working towards creating binary releases of Nimbus for Linux, Mac, and Windows. We'll be publishing them initially on our GitHub repositories, which I guess that's important news. Our GitHub repositories have been renamed. Now the formerly called Nimbeacon chain repo is called Nimbus-E2, and the Eth2.0 project is called Nimbus-Eth2.0. We've implemented, starting from weak subjectivity checkpoints. And I'm curious to discuss with the other clients, how do you manage the history of deposits in this mode? In what we implemented, it seems that a checkpoint is something that should store the entire state, the entire history of deposits up to that point in order to be able to create new blocks and some other small pieces of data. We've started testing started doing interop tests for gossips of 1.1 in the multinet repo. It's still not enabled in the builds we do for the public testnets, but this is hopefully going to be enabled soon. Furthermore, there's ongoing work on reducing the size of our database. This is probably the most significant problem with Nimbus right now. And we are, along with this work, we are further reducing the memory usage of Nimbus, which is already quite good. And that's it for me.
Got it, thank you. We can follow up after the call, but does anybody have any quick comments for Zahari on block production in this context? That is handling Eth1 deposits once you've started from a weak subjectivity state point. Okay, let's handle it outside the call. Thanks, Zahari. Teku.
Hi, everyone. From the techo side, we've enabled moderately strict weak subjectivity handling. For now, we're just logging warnings if the client falls outside the weak subjectivity period, because we want to avoid abruptly changing sync behavior on Medalla. We've been addressing issues from our audit, deprecating validator tools to send register deposits, hoping that people will use Launchpad instead. Removing ability to enable disable P2P snappy compression via the CLI. Stricter handling, we've implemented stricter handling on our gossip queues, and added ancestry checks to our networking layer. We've implemented the standard validator API enough that the techo validator can now optionally run in a separate process and use the standard API events. We still have a few non-standard APIs to convert over. Our DiskV5.1 implementation is now merged to its own repo and is ready to be integrated as a techo. We merged a PR, which would reduce our native memory consumption by about half a gig. We looked into the 1.0 RC0 changes. We got a couple of networking details to implement, plus the BLS private key 0 changes, but otherwise all reference tests are passing. That's it.
Excellent. Thank you, Jim. Prism.
Hey guys, so from Prismatic side, we are actually really excited to release our beta of xero software by early next week. And this is exciting because it allows us to remove a bunch of deprecated flags. And then we also clean up our general flags. And also in the background, we're working on the Eth2 API's data layer. We're working on slashing, protecting interchangeable format. We're working on DiskV5.1 to make sure that we have a graceful upgrade path. we're working on BOS v4 and the peer scoring. And we're also aligning with the spec version 1.00 RC. And at the same time, with also release web UI. So please give that a try and give us any feedback. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you. Congrats on getting the UI out. Lighthouse.
So we had a pretty good Zinken launch, I guess, pretty much like everyone else. Went very smoothly. I just checked the validator leaderboard. I think 9 of the 10 validators are on the Lighthouse, which is good to see. We've also released a v0.3.0, also known as King Flippy Nips. It's a breaking release. A whole bunch of changes were incorporated into this release. We have a new directory structure. We've integrated the weak subjectivity checkpoint, UPnP support as well. We have a stricter slashing protection mechanism, and we pretty much we have pretty much all the standard API implemented. We're working towards full compliance. There's only a couple of endpoints left. As Danny mentioned earlier, we're also passing the V1 release candidate 0 spec tests, which is good to see. We've made some great progress on our graphical user interface. Herman has authored the draft EIP for a remote signer API. So it's EIP 3030. Please take a look, leave some feedback. I know Terence has been commenting on the pull request. Thanks for that. And our auditors have been working throughout the external security assessment. So Trail of Bits and Least Authority have completed their reviews, and NCC is still going. So nothing really major came up of these first 2 reviews. And yeah, those findings are currently being addressed. And that's about it.
Got it. Thank you. Okay. Research updates. Anything you want to share here?
And I can give an update on what we've been doing in terms of weak subjectivity, or sorry, not weak subjectivity, data availability sampling. So basically, we've been thinking about the question of how to simplify phase 1 and make it as oriented toward just doing having data on chain and not doing anything else, which is realistically something that probably makes sense anyway, because phase 1 does not support any kind of state execution, but there were a lot of complexities in it that were kind of designed around pushing for a particular state execution path, and so if we're going with the mindset that if it's not even clear exactly what's or potentially if any kind of enshrined multi-shard state execution is going to exist further down the line, then it makes sense to have a phase 1 that's more kind of just doing designed around doing the thing that it's doing well, which is basically having consensus over blobs of data. But if we want to have consensus over blobs of data, then one of the benefits that we can immediately try to capture is reduce the level of dependence on committees, right? And the reason we want to, I think, reduce the level of dependence on committees is that committees are this kind of uncomfortable assumption where either there's a hard two-thirds minimum requirement, in which case more than 1/3 offline would cause the committees to stop working, or it's a more kind of flexible and dynamic system. But then in that case, if you can just knock a bunch of nodes offline, then an attacker with significantly less than 1/3 could potentially break a committee. So that violates the assumptions too. And so in the context of data sharding, if we want to not fully rely on the committee assumption, then data availability sampling is basically the thing that we can do. And if we want to do data availability sampling, then this requires a particular structure for clients to be able to make queries for particular indices in shard blocks. And so we've been having a couple of calls and discussions around just like what's the exact kind of what's the exact format, and then what's the exact structure, like what subnets would look like, what they would do, and so forth. And it seems like we've been making quite a bit of progress.
Yep. Thank you, Vitalik. Any questions for Vitalik? I expect some of those that have been working on this will probably release some write-ups soon for further discussion.
Regarding reforming the shard transition by adding the shard transition candidate, is there any plan of merging that PR, or are we waiting?
I think realistically, that PR is superseded by this work.
Some of the rewards accounting could potentially still be merged. So
this is true.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to merge that until we get a 1.0 out, regardless.
Mm-hmm.
Got it.
I mean, it's really a question of you have data availability sampling, and you have potentially committees that can do proof of custody, and they provide different guarantees and potentially have different latencies and how the consensus can rely upon them. And we're trying to explore that design space right now.
Right. So, like, examples of things that could potentially be different would be, like, one is that we don't even need a shard state as or even shardness like as a construction. I mean, and shard transitions, like, we might need something that's much simpler, but like there wouldn't be a lot of the state related things. Instead, it would just be like if we do have a committee on top of the data availability sampling, then you would just have like some kind of progress tracking that waits until it hits 50% or whatever threshold we want. Another example is replacing shard block Merkle roots with Kate commitments.
Okay. How feasible are Kate commitments, in your opinion, technically, to ship?
Very, very feasible. The applications on Ethereum have been doing them already for over a year.
Gotcha.
I mean, it depends entirely on the size, right? I mean, the only problem we have is computing the proofs when they become large. That's
that scales linearly with size.
Right. Like we did the math for 1 megabyte, right? And I recall it not being too bad. Yeah.
Yeah, so it scales with linearly if you want to compute one proof, and n-log n if you want to compute all the proofs, but with a large constant in this case.
Gotcha.
We'd also need a trusted setup, right?
Yes, that's one downside of KZG commitments.
I forget, are there existing BLS 12.3.1 setups that we can build on top of, or would we just have to make our own?
Yeah, the Filecoin one, I think, is BLS 12.3.1.
Mm-hmm. Right, and using that and then just like adding 100 of us seems reasonable. I mean, data availability sampling has a few of n honesty assumptions already, so like is adding another one of honesty assumption really breaking much, I guess. And then in the long term, there's other things that we can upgrade to as well.
Okay. Anything else on data availability sampling? Any other questions before we move on? Gotcha. Other research items people would like to discuss?
I actually have an update from txrx.
Great.
Our team undergoes some reorganization because we are losing our Texan part, which is very sad. Yeah, but the research keeps going. Alex continues his work on the PySpec transpiler. Also, he looks into transpiling the PySpec into Rust because Rust has a pretty suitable memory model for programming blockchains, and with this like translation, it will be possible to build a pure functional form of the PySpec. Also, we have recently started to work on withdrawals to Eth1 shard. And if one is to transition design and strategies, the research regarding that is also in progress. Hopefully, you'll soon see updates on the research. Yeah, that's all from our side.
Got it. Thank you. Anything else before we move on?
Yeah, Danny. One thing, we have been looking into different metrics from different clients. In this case, we have been looking into 4 clients. We're going to try to look into a few more later. And we have gathered a list of metrics that we believe kind of are identical between clients, but they have different names. And we have put all this into a spreadsheet and try to kind of match the different metrics that are equivalent between different clients. And it would be interesting to see if maybe the teams involved in developing could take a look at the spreadsheet. I'm going to add it into the chat and help us check whether these metrics are equivalent between clients, because it would be very interesting to try to see how different clients perform in different aspects. And so that is in a first step, and perhaps in a second step we could think about trying to make some kind of a standard so that all clients kind of use the same naming for these metrics, so that it's much easier to compare them in the future.
So these are Prometheus metrics that are reported?
Yes, exactly, yeah.
Gotcha. I think there's been an idle attempt to try to standardize on some of them at some point, but I don't know if that ever got pushed forward. But yeah, thanks for sharing the doc. Appreciate it.
Thank you. We can try to propose some kind of standard that is going to be kind of similar based on the names that the different clients use, and then we can submit this for approval for the different clients and see what they think about it.
Cool. Can you open up that doc? I think that it's locked right now.
Ah, okay. Yeah, I will open.
Great. Anything else here? Cool. Networking. Obviously, we have this 5.1 implementations. I think are near complete, and discussion as to what to do with Madasha. Are there other networking items that people want to talk about today? Cool. And moving on, spec discussion. Anything spec related. I'm capturing a few more complicated scenarios that will probably appear in the test vectors for V1.0. I might release those very soon. But otherwise, general stability, phase 1 stuff. There is that big PR that Terrence mentioned that has some reformulations of phase 1 and some reformulations of how rewards are counted. But that will stay as is, at least until we release 1.0 and dig a little bit deeper on the data availability sampling thinking. Anything else here? Great. Open discussion. Anybody have anything? Okay. Well, in that case, thank you. Talk to you all very soon. Keep up the good work.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.